The sharp crack of the wagon wheel braking echoed across the Nevada desert like a gunshot, stopping Josephine Vance dead in her tracks. Dust swirled around her ankles as she climbed down from the driver's seat, her heart sinking at the sight of the splintered wood and bent metal. The blazing June sun of 1876 beat down mercilessly as she stood on the lonely road just 5 miles outside of Goldfield, Nevada, with nothing but sagebrush and distant mountains for company. "No, no, no," Josephine muttered, pushing a strand of copper hair back under her bonnet. "Not now. Not here." She knelt beside the broken wheel, her blue calico dress gathering dust. The wooden spokes had shattered, and the metal rim was twisted beyond repair. It wasn't just broken, it was destroyed. Josephine had spent the last of her money on supplies in the previous town, counting on reaching Goldfield by nightfall, where her aunt had promised her work as a schoolteacher. Now, with the sun still high but steadily sinking toward the western horizon, she faced the prospect of a night alone in the desert. She stood and wiped her hands on her apron, squinting down the dusty road toward town. Walking 5 miles in this heat wasn't impossible, but leaving her wagon and belongings unattended seemed foolish. Not that she had much, just some clothes, books, and family mementos, but they were all she had left in the world. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her turn. A rider appeared on the horizon, and Josephine hesitated. Being alone with a stranger on the open road wasn't ideal for a woman traveling by herself, but neither was being stranded with a broken wagon. As the rider drew closer, she could make out a tall man on a chestnut stallion. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face, and his duster coat billowed slightly in the breeze. He slowed as he approached, and Josephine straightened her spine, trying to appear composed despite her predicament. "Afternoon, madam," he called, tipping his hat back to reveal a sun-bronzed face with kind eyes. "Looks like you've got yourself some trouble here." "The wheel broke," Josephine replied, relieved that the stranger appeared respectable. "I was hoping to reach Goldfield before dark." The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing his impressive height. He approached the wagon and knelt to examine the damage. "Name's Owen O'Malley," he said, running his fingers over the splintered wood. "I've got a ranch not far from here." "Josephine Vance," she replied, watching as he assessed the damage with expert eyes. His hands were strong and calloused, but they moved with surprising gentleness over the broken wheel. "I'm headed to Goldfield to stay with my aunt. She's arranged a teaching position for me at the school there." Owen stood and dusted off his hands. "This wheel's beyond repair, Miss Vance. You'll need a new one entirely." He glanced at her wagon and then at her. "I've got tools and spare parts at my ranch. Could fix it for you, but it'd take time." Josephine bit her lip, calculating her options. "I'm afraid I don't have any money to pay you, Mr. O'Malley. I spent my last dollar on supplies." Owen's eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "No need for payment. I wouldn't leave a lady stranded out here. Desert gets mighty cold once the sun goes down, and there are coyotes about." Josephine hesitated. Accepting help from a stranger went against everything her father had taught her about self-reliance, but she had few options. "That's very kind, but I couldn't impose." "It's no imposition," Owen interrupted. "I've got plenty of room at the ranch, and my housekeeper, Mrs. Winters, is always complaining about not having company. You can stay the night, and I'll fix your wagon first thing tomorrow." Before Josephine could respond, the sound of another approaching wagon drew their attention. A cloud of dust accompanied a large supply wagon rumbling down the road from the direction of Goldfield. "That'll be Ezra Tompkins," Owen said. "Makes supply runs between Carson City and Goldfield twice a month." He waved to flag down the approaching wagon. The driver, A portly man with a gray beard pulled up beside them. "Owen O'Malley, what brings you out this way, and who's the lady?" "This is Miss Josephine Vance, headed for Goldfield. Her wagon wheels busted," Owen explained. "Ezra, would you mind taking Miss Vance's things into town? She can ride with me to the ranch, and I'll fix her wheel." Ezra tugged at his beard thoughtfully. "Don't see why not. Got plenty of room since I'm heading back empty." He looked at Josephine. "Where are you staying in town, miss?" "With my Aunt Margaret Holloway on Pine Street," Josephine replied. "Know her well," Ezra nodded. "I'll let her know what happened so she won't worry." Josephine felt relief wash over her. "Thank you, Mr. Tompkins. I would be most grateful." Together, the men transferred Josephine's trunks and boxes to Ezra's wagon. Owen tied her horse to the back of the supply wagon, arranging for Ezra to drop it off at the town livery. "Don't you worry about a thing, Miss Vance," Ezra said as he prepared to depart. "Owen O'Malley's a good man. Best horseman and ranch owner in these parts." After Ezra departed with her belongings, Josephine stood awkwardly beside Owen's horse. The thought of riding with this stranger made her uncomfortable, despite Ezra's endorsement. Owen seemed to sense her hesitation. "I know it's not proper, Miss Vance, but I promise you'll be safe. My ranch is only about 3 miles from here." Josephine nodded, knowing she had little choice. "Very well, Mr. O'Malley. I appreciate your help." Owen mounted first, then reached down to help her up behind him. Josephine settled onto the horse, trying to maintain a proper distance despite the circumstances. "You might want to hold on, Miss Vance," Owen suggested. "This fella can get spirited." Reluctantly, Josephine placed her hands lightly on Owen's sides. As soon as the horse started moving, she realized this wouldn't be sufficient and found herself clutching more firmly to the cowboy's sturdy frame. They rode in silence for a time, the desert landscape spreading out around them in golden hues as the sun began its descent. The mountains in the distance turned purple against the reddening sky. "What brings you to Goldfield?" Owen asked, breaking the silence. "Most folks are leaving mining towns these days, not coming to them." "My father passed away 3 months ago," Josephine replied, her voice catching slightly. "Our farm in Missouri was heavily mortgaged. After settling his debts, there was nothing left. My aunt is the only family I have remaining." "I'm sorry for your loss," Owen said, genuine sympathy in his voice. "Losing family is never easy." "Thank you," Josephine murmured. "What about you, Mr. O'Malley? Have you always lived in Nevada?" Owen chuckled. "No, madam. Born in Boston, if you can believe it. My father was a shipping merchant. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, but I had different ideas. Came west when I was 20, worked as a ranch hand for years before saving enough to buy my own spread." "That's quite impressive," Josephine said, genuinely intrigued by his story. "How long have you owned your ranch?" "Going on 8 years now," Owen replied with pride evident in his voice. "Started small, but we've grown every year. Got about 2,000 acres and 500 head of cattle now." As they crested a small rise, Owen's ranch came into view. Josephine couldn't help but gasp. The sprawling property nestled in a valley between 2 ridges was far larger than she'd imagined. A large 2-story house stood near a creek, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a barn. In the distance, cattle grazed on the green grass fed by the creek water. "Welcome to the Diamondback Ranch, Miss Vance," Owen said, a hint of pride in his voice. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, shading her eyes against the setting sun. She was older, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing a simple dress and apron. "That's Mrs. Winters, my housekeeper," Owen explained as they drew closer. "Been with me since I bought the place. Makes the best apple pie you'll ever taste." Owen helped Josephine dismount when they reached the house, his strong hands spanning her waist as he lifted her effortlessly from the horse. "Owen O'Malley, who is this young lady and why are you bringing her home at this hour?" Mrs. Winters demanded, hands on her hips, though her expression was more curious than angry. "Mrs. Winters, this is Miss Josephine Vance," Owen said. "Her wagon broke down on the road to Goldfield. I've offered to fix it for her and provide lodging for the night." Mrs. Winters's stern expression softened immediately. "Well, you poor dear, come inside and get out of this heat. You must be parched." "Thank you, Mrs. Winters," Josephine said gratefully, following the older woman into the house while Owen led his horse toward the barn. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly elegant, with polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and tasteful decorations. It was far more refined than Josephine had expected for a bachelor's residence in the Nevada territory. "The master had this all shipped in from San Francisco," Mrs. Winters explained, noticing Josephine's admiring gaze. "Said if he was going to live in the wilderness, he wasn't going to live like a savage." Mrs. Winters showed Josephine to a guest bedroom on the second floor, a lovely room with a 4-poster bed and lace curtains. "Dinner will be ready in an hour," the housekeeper informed her. "There's water in the pitcher for washing up. I'll find you something clean to wear since your things are headed to town." Before Josephine could protest, Mrs. Winters had bustled out of the room. Left alone, Josephine sank onto the bed, the events of the day catching up with her. She was in a stranger's home, miles from her destination, dependent on the kindness of a man she'd just met. Yet, something about Owen O'Malley made her feel safe, despite her predicament. She washed the dust from her face and hands, then loosened her hair from its tight bun, massaging her scalp. A soft knock at the door announced Mrs. Winters's return. The housekeeper carried a simple but lovely blue dress over her arm. "This belonged to Mr. O'Malley's sister when she visited last summer," Mrs. Winters explained. "She's about your size, I think." "I didn't realize Mr. O'Malley had family nearby," Josephine remarked as she accepted the dress. "Just his sister, Catherine. She lives in San Francisco with her husband, visits once or twice a year." Mrs. Winters turned to leave, then paused. "Mr. O'Malley is a good man, Miss Vance. One of the best I've ever known. You're safe here." Josephine nodded, touched by the woman's reassurance. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters, I believe you." After changing into the borrowed dress, which fit surprisingly well, Josephine made her way downstairs. She found Owen in the parlor, freshly washed and changed into clean clothes. Without his hat, she could see his full face clearly for the first time. He was handsome, with strong features softened by warm brown eyes and laugh lines at their corners. His dark hair was neatly combed back, still damp from washing. He stood when she entered the room. "Miss Vance, I hope you're finding everything comfortable." "Very much so, thank you," she replied, suddenly self-conscious under his gaze. "Your home is beautiful, Mr. O'Malley." "Please call me Owen," he said with a smile. "Mr. O'Malley makes me feel like my father." "Then you must call me Josephine," she responded, returning his smile. Mrs. Winters announced dinner, and Owen escorted Josephine to the dining room where a spread of roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables awaited them. "This looks wonderful, Mrs. Winters," Josephine exclaimed. "You shouldn't have gone to so much trouble." "It's no trouble at all," the housekeeper replied. "It's nice cooking for someone who appreciates it. The ranch hands would eat shoe leather if I served it with enough gravy." Owen laughed at this, and the sound of it warmed Josephine's heart unexpectedly. They sat down to eat, and conversation flowed easily between them. Owen told stories of ranch life, while Josephine shared tales of growing up on a Missouri farm and her years as a student at a women's seminary. "So you're trained as a teacher?" Owen asked as they enjoyed slices of Mrs. Winters's famous apple pie for dessert. Yes, though I've only had one position before, at a small school near our farm, Josephine replied. When my father fell ill, I had to give it up to care for him. Goldfield is lucky to have you, Owen said sincerely. Our school has gone through 3 teachers in the past year. Most young women don't last long out here. Are you suggesting I won't last either, Mr. O'Malley? Josephine asked with a raised eyebrow. Owen's eyes twinkled. Not at all. I think you might be made of sterner stuff than most, Miss Vance. After dinner, they retired to the porch with cups of coffee. The sun had set, and the sky was a canvas of stars unlike anything Josephine had seen before. The desert air had cooled considerably, and Owen draped a blanket around her shoulders. It's beautiful, Josephine breathed, gazing up at the night sky. I've never seen so many stars. One of the reasons I love it out here, Owen said, leaning against the porch railing. No city lights to dim the view. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds of the desert, the distant howl of coyotes, the chirping of crickets, the soft rustling of wind through the sagebrush. I'll start on your wagon wheel first thing in the morning, Owen said eventually. Should have you on your way to Goldfield by noon. Josephine felt a twinge of unexpected disappointment at the thought of leaving so soon. Thank you. I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't come along. Sometimes fate has a way of putting us where we need to be, Owen replied thoughtfully. The next morning, after a hearty breakfast, Owen took Josephine to the workshop behind the barn where he'd already begun work on her wagon wheel. The broken one had been brought back by one of his ranch hands the previous evening. You're quite skilled, Josephine observed as she watched him work, shaping the wood with practiced hands. Necessity, Owen replied with a shrug. Out here, you either learn to fix things yourself or you do without. By mid-morning, the new wheel was ready. Owen had one of his men hitch up the team to his wagon, and they rode back to where Josephine's wagon still sat by the roadside. It took Owen and 2 of his ranch hands less than an hour to install the new wheel and ensure the wagon was road-worthy. When they finished, Josephine approached Owen, her hand extended. "How can I ever thank you?" she asked earnestly. Owen took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he held it gently between both of his. "Consider it a wedding gift," he said with a mysterious smile. Josephine's brow furrowed in confusion. "I don't understand. I'm not getting married." "Not yet," Owen said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "But I have a feeling about these things." Before Josephine could respond to this perplexing statement, Owen had released her hand and was helping her up onto the wagon seat. "Goldfield's straight down this road. You can't miss it," he said, handing her the reins. "When you get there, ask anyone for directions to your aunt's house. Everyone knows everyone in town." "Will I see you again?" Josephine asked, surprised by her own boldness. "Count on it," Owen replied with a confident smile. "I come into town every Saturday for supplies." "Perhaps I'll see you then." With that, he stepped back and Josephine clicked her tongue to set the horses in motion. As she drove away, she couldn't resist looking back over her shoulder. Owen O'Malley stood in the road watching her, his tall figure silhouetted against the vast Nevada landscape. Goldfield appeared on the horizon just as Owen had promised, a collection of wooden buildings clustered together in the desert. As Josephine drove down the main street, she marveled at the bustle of activity. Despite being a small town, Goldfield was lively, with people moving purposefully from building to building, wagons delivering goods and horses tied up outside various establishments. She stopped a passing woman to ask directions to Pine Street and was pointed toward a row of neat houses set back from the main thoroughfare. Finding her aunt's house was simple enough, a white two-story with blue shutters, and a small garden struggling to survive in the desert climate. Aunt Margaret emerged from the house before Josephine had even climbed down from the wagon, alerted by the sound of wheels on her street. "Josephine! Oh, thank heavens!" The older woman hurried down the path, her arms outstretched. "Mr. Tompkins told me what happened. I was so worried, even though he assured me you were in good hands with Mr. O'Malley." Josephine embraced her aunt warmly. Margaret Holloway was her father's sister, a tall woman with the same copper hair as Josephine, though now streaked with silver. She had moved west 20 years earlier with her husband, who had since passed away, leaving her the house and a modest income from investments. "I'm fine, Aunt Margaret. Mr. O'Malley was a perfect gentleman," Josephine assured her. "He fixed my wagon and wouldn't accept a penny for it." Margaret's eyes twinkled. "Owen O'Malley is known for his generosity and his good looks, if I may say so." Josephine felt her cheeks warm. "Aunt Margaret, I hardly notice such things." Her aunt laughed knowingly but didn't press the issue. "Come inside, dear. Your things arrived yesterday, and I've set up the guest room for you. You must be exhausted from your journey." The next few days passed in a whirl of activity as Josephine settled into her aunt's home and prepared for her teaching position. The school was a simple one-room building near the center of town, responsible for educating children aged 6 to 16. The previous teacher had left abruptly to marry a miner who'd struck it rich, leaving the town desperate for a replacement. Josephine met with the school board on Tuesday, composed of the town mayor, the minister, and the owner of the largest general store. They seemed impressed with her credentials and experience, and by the end of the meeting, she was officially hired to begin teaching the following Monday. As Saturday approached, Josephine found herself thinking more and more about Owen O'Malley. She told herself it was merely gratitude for his help, but the flutter in her stomach whenever she recalled his parting words suggested otherwise. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright. Josephine helped her aunt with household chores, then suggested they visit the general store for supplies. "What a wonderful idea," Aunt Margaret agreed with a knowing smile. "Mr. Thompson just received a shipment of fabric from San Francisco that I've been eager to see." They walked arm in arm down the main street, greeting neighbors along the way. Goldfield was a friendly town, and already many people knew Josephine as the new schoolteacher. Children waved to her, and parents greeted her respectfully. The general store was busy, as was typical for a Saturday. Josephine and her aunt browsed the shelves while Margaret chatted with friends. Josephine was examining a display of writing paper when the bell above the door jingled, and a hush fell over the female customers. She turned to see Owen O'Malley entering the store, removing his hat as he stepped inside. He was even more handsome than she remembered, dressed in clean clothes with his dark hair neatly combed. Several women immediately found reasons to approach him, offering warm greetings and lingering smiles. Owen responded politely to each, but his eyes scanned the store until they landed on Josephine. A genuine smile spread across his face as he made his way toward her, seemingly oblivious to the disappointed looks from the other women. "Miss Vance," he greeted her, stopping a respectful distance away. "I'm pleased to see you settled in Goldfield." "Mr. O'Malley," Josephine replied, hoping the warmth in her cheeks wasn't visible. "How fortunate to run into you. I wanted to thank you again for your help." "It was my pleasure," Owen assured her. "How are you finding our little town?" "Everyone has been very welcoming," Josephine said. "I start teaching on Monday." "The children are lucky to have you," Owen said sincerely. He hesitated, then added, "I was wondering if you might allow me to escort you to church tomorrow, that is, if you don't already have arrangements." Before Josephine could respond, Aunt Margaret appeared at her side. "Mr. O'Malley, how lovely to see you," she said warmly. "I understand we have you to thank for rescuing my niece." "Mrs. Holloway," Owen greeted her with a respectful nod. "It was no trouble at all. Your niece handled the situation with remarkable composure." "I've just invited Miss Vance to attend church with me tomorrow," Owen explained. "With your blessing, of course." "What a splendid idea," Margaret replied, ignoring Josephine's surprised glance. "We would be delighted to have you accompany us." Owen's face lit up with a smile. "Excellent. Shall I call for you ladies at 10 o'clock? "That would be perfect," Margaret agreed before Josephine could say a word. After Owen had moved away to conduct his business, Josephine turned to her aunt. "Aunt Margaret, you didn't even ask if I wanted to accept his invitation." Margaret's eyes twinkled mischievously. "Did you not want to accept?" Josephine opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. "Well, that's not the point." "Dear Josephine," her aunt said gently, "every unmarried woman in Goldfield has set her cap for Owen O'Malley for the past 5 years. Yet he's never shown particular interest in any of them. If he's singled you out, there must be something special he sees in you." "It's only church," Josephine protested weakly. "In Goldfield, a man escorting a woman to church is practically announcing his intentions," Margaret informed her with a knowing smile. The next morning, Josephine found herself taking extra care with her appearance. She wore her best dress, a sage green that complemented her auburn hair, which she arranged in a fashionable style with soft curls framing her face. Owen arrived promptly at 10 o'clock, driving a shiny black buggy pulled by 2 matching bay horses. He looked striking in a dark suit, white shirt and string tie, his hat held respectfully in his hands as Aunt Margaret welcomed him into the parlor. "Miss Vance," he said when Josephine entered the room, his voice soft with admiration. "You look beautiful this morning." "Thank you, Mr. O'Malley," Josephine replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "You're very kind." The ride to church was pleasant, with Aunt Margaret carrying most of the conversation, telling stories about Goldfield's early days and its colorful inhabitants. Owen listened attentively, occasionally adding details or correcting small points, showing his deep knowledge of the area's history. At the church, a simple white clapboard building with a modest steeple, Josephine became acutely aware of the stares and whispers as Owen escorted her and her aunt to a pew. Many of the town's unmarried women watched with undisguised curiosity and, in some cases, resentment. "Don't mind them," Owen whispered, leaning close enough that his breath tickled her ear. "They'll find something new to gossip about by next week." After the service, it seemed the entire congregation wanted to meet the new schoolteacher, especially since she'd arrived on the arm of Owen O'Malley. Parents introduced their children, elderly residents shared stories of Goldfield's first school, and the minister expressed his gratitude that the position had been filled so quickly. Through it all, Owen remained by her side, his presence both reassuring and exciting. When they finally escaped the crowd, he suggested a drive before returning to Aunt Margaret's house for Sunday dinner. "If that would be agreeable to you both," he asked, looking from Josephine to her aunt. "Most agreeable," Margaret replied with a smile. "I have a roast already prepared. It will be ready whenever we return." The drive took them out of town, along a winding road that followed a small creek. The desert landscape was beautiful in the clear light of day, with distant mountains providing a dramatic backdrop to the sagebrush-covered hills. "I love this spot," Owen said as he brought the buggy to a stop beneath a cluster of cottonwood trees beside the creek. "It's peaceful here." He helped both women down from the buggy and suggested a short walk along the water's edge. Aunt Margaret conveniently remembered. She'd brought some mending and opted to remain with the buggy, giving Owen and Josephine a chance to speak privately. They walked slowly beside the creek, maintaining a proper distance between them as propriety demanded, though Josephine found herself wishing they could walk arm in arm. "You've made quite an impression on the town already," Owen remarked. "Everyone I spoke with is excited about the new teacher." "I hope I can live up to their expectations," Josephine replied. "Some of the older boys look rather challenging." Owen chuckled. "They may try to test you at first, but stand your ground and you'll earn their respect." He glanced at her with warmth in his eyes. "I have complete faith in you." "You hardly know me, Mr. O'Malley," Josephine pointed out, though she was touched by his confidence. "I'm a good judge of character," he replied simply. "And please, I thought we'd agreed you would call me Owen." "Owen," Josephine said, testing the name on her lips and finding she liked the sound of it. They continued walking in companionable silence for a time, the only sounds the burble of the creek and the occasional call of a desert bird. "May I ask you something, Owen?" Josephine finally ventured. "Anything," he replied. "When you fixed my wagon, you said to consider it a wedding gift," she reminded him. "What did you mean by that?" Owen stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "I meant that from the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, something told me you were going to be important in my life." He paused, then added with a small smile, "I know it sounds foolish. My sister always says I'm too impulsive." "It doesn't sound foolish," Josephine admitted softly. "Just unexpected." Owen's eyes searched her face. "I'm not proposing marriage after knowing you for only a week, Josephine. I'm not that impulsive, but I would very much like the chance to court you properly if you're amenable." Josephine felt her heart flutter in her chest. No man had ever affected her this way before. There had been suitors back in Missouri, but none had inspired this mixture of excitement and comfort, of familiarity and anticipation. "I would like that very much, Owen," she replied honestly. His smile was radiant. "Then that's settled." He offered his arm. "Shall we return to your aunt before she sends out a search party?" Sunday dinner was a delightful affair, with easy conversation flowing between the three of them. Aunt Margaret regaled them with stories of her early days in Goldfield, while Owen shared humorous tales of ranch life. Josephine found herself laughing more than she had in months. As Owen prepared to leave that afternoon, he asked permission to call on Josephine the following Saturday. "I know you'll be busy with school during the week," he said, "but perhaps we could have dinner in town on Saturday evening." "That would be lovely," Josephine agreed, touched by his consideration of her new responsibilities. The week passed in a blur of activity as Josephine began her teaching duties. The schoolhouse was small but adequate, with rows of wooden desks facing a larger desk and blackboard at the front. 27 students of varying ages arrived on Monday morning, regarding their new teacher with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to outright rebellion in the case of some older boys. By Friday, Josephine had established her authority through a combination of firm discipline and genuine interest in each student's progress. Even the most recalcitrant boys had begun to respond to her teaching methods, which emphasized practical applications of knowledge rather than rote memorization. Saturday evening arrived with an air of anticipation. Owen came to collect her in his buggy, looking handsome in a clean shirt and vest, his usually unruly hair tamed with pomade. "You look beautiful," he said sincerely as he helped her into the buggy. "Thank you," Josephine replied, smoothing the skirt of her blue dress, one of the few nice garments she'd brought from Missouri. "Where are we going this evening?" "The Grand Hotel has the best dining room in town," Owen explained as he guided the horse down Pine Street toward the main thoroughfare. It's not San Francisco cuisine, but Mrs. Larson, the cook, worked in a fine Denver restaurant before moving to Goldfield. The Grand Hotel was indeed the most impressive building in town, a 3-story structure with actual glass windows and a veranda across the front. Inside, the dining room was decorated with white tablecloths and silver candlesticks, creating an atmosphere of elegance unusual for a frontier town. The maitre d' greeted Owen by name and led them to a table by the window. Several diners looked up as they passed, and Josephine was acutely aware that they were the center of attention. "Is it always like this?" she whispered to Owen as he held her chair. "Like what?" he asked, genuinely puzzled. "Everyone watching us," Josephine explained once he was seated across from her. Owen glanced around, seeming to notice the stares for the first time. "I suppose it is. I don't usually pay much attention." He leaned forward slightly. "Does it bother you?" Josephine considered the question. "Not if it doesn't bother you." Owen's smile was warm. "The only person in this room whose opinion concerns me is sitting across the table." The dinner was excellent, with tender roast beef, fresh vegetables, and freshly baked bread. Conversation flowed easily between them as they discovered shared interests in literature, music, and even politics, though Owen expressed surprise at Josephine's support for women's suffrage. "You don't believe women should have the right to vote?" she challenged him. "I hadn't given it much thought," Owen admitted. "But hearing your arguments, I find myself persuaded. You make a compelling case, Miss Vance." "Is that so rare, Mr. O'Malley? A woman with opinions on matters beyond the domestic sphere?" Josephine asked with a raised eyebrow. "Not rare," Owen replied thoughtfully. "Just rare that anyone bothers to listen to them. I'm trying to be better than most in that regard." As they enjoyed dessert, a delicious apple tart with whipped cream, Owen spoke of his ranch and his plans for its future. "I've just purchased an additional 1,000 acres to the north," he explained. "There's a year-round spring there that will allow me to expand the herd significantly." "You clearly love your work," Josephine observed, charmed by his enthusiasm. "I do," Owen agreed. "There's something deeply satisfying about building something from nothing, watching it grow year by year." He paused, then added more softly, "But lately I've been thinking the ranch is missing something important." "What's that?" Josephine asked. Owen's eyes met hers across the table. "A family to share it with." The simple statement hung in the air between them, laden with meaning. Josephine felt her breath catch in her throat as she recognized the quiet longing in his voice, a longing that echoed her own secret desires. "That is important," she agreed softly. After dinner, they walked along the main street, now quiet as most businesses had closed for the evening. The air was cool, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky above them. "May I write to you during the week?" Owen asked as they strolled. "I know you'll be busy with school, but I'd like to continue our conversations even when we can't meet in person." "I'd like that very much," Josephine replied, touched by the request. When they returned to Aunt Margaret's house, Owen escorted Josephine to the door. In the soft glow of the porch lantern, he took her hand gently in his. "Thank you for a wonderful evening," he said, his voice low. "May I call on you again next Saturday?" "Yes," Josephine replied without hesitation. Owen lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Until then, Miss Vance." The touch of his lips on her skin sent a thrill through Josephine that lingered long after he departed. True to his word, a letter arrived for Josephine on Tuesday, delivered by one of Owen's ranch hands. It was thoughtfully written, asking about her first days of teaching and sharing news of life at the ranch. Josephine replied that evening, and thus began a correspondence that continued alongside their Saturday outings. Each week, Owen would take Josephine someplace new: a picnic by the creek, a community dance at the town hall, a theater troupe that passed through performing Shakespeare. With each meeting, Josephine found herself falling deeper under Owen O'Malley's spell. By mid-October, as the desert air turned crisp with approaching winter, Josephine realized she was irrevocably in love with him. The realization came not in a dramatic moment, but during a quiet Sunday afternoon as they sat on Aunt Margaret's porch, discussing a book they'd both read. Owen was arguing passionately for the protagonist's choices, his hands gesturing animatedly, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. And Josephine thought simply, "I love this man." The thought should have frightened her. They'd known each other only a few months, but instead, it felt like recognizing a truth that had always existed. That evening, after Owen had departed, Aunt Margaret settled beside Josephine in the parlor, her knitting needles clicking rhythmically. "He's in love with you, you know," Margaret said without preamble. Josephine looked up from her book, startled. "Pardon, Owen O'Malley," her aunt clarified unnecessarily. "He's in love with you, has been since the day he found you with that broken wagon, if I'm any judge of such matters." "Aunt Margaret, really, and you're in love with him?" Margaret continued, her needles never slowing. "The question is, what are you two going to do about it?" Josephine closed her book, giving up any pretense of reading. "I don't know what you mean." Margaret fixed her with a knowing look. "Don't you? The man has been courting you properly for months. Everyone in town expects an announcement any day now." "An announcement?" Josephine echoed weakly. "Of your engagement, dear," Margaret said patiently. "Surely you've considered the possibility." Josephine had indeed considered it, dreamed of it even, but hearing it stated so baldly made it suddenly real. "We've never discussed marriage," she admitted. "Perhaps it's time you did," her aunt suggested gently. "Life is short, Josephine. Your father's passing should have taught you that. Don't waste time when you've found something precious." The following Saturday, Owen arrived with a proposal that broke from their usual routine. "I thought we might ride out to the ranch today," he suggested. "Mrs. Winters has been asking after you, and I'd like to show you the improvements I've made since you were there." Josephine agreed readily, curious to see the ranch again, and touched that his housekeeper had remembered her. They set out mid-morning, the ride giving them ample time to talk. Owen spoke of his plans for the ranch's expansion, the new breeding stock he'd acquired, and his ideas for improving the main house. "I've added a conservatory on the east side," he explained. "The glass was shipped all the way from Boston. Mrs. Winters says it's excessive, but I thought it would be nice to have fresh flowers and greenery even in winter." "It sounds lovely," Josephine said sincerely. "I've always dreamed of having a conservatory someday." Owen glanced at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Have you?" "What else have you dreamed of, Josephine?" The question seemed weighted with significance. Josephine considered her answer carefully. "A home filled with books and music. A garden, even though I know that's challenging in the desert, children running through the halls." She paused, then added softly, "Someone to share it all with." Owen's hand reached across to cover hers where it rested on the buggy seat. "I have similar dreams," he said simply. The ranch appeared on the horizon, looking even more impressive than Josephine remembered. As they approached, she could see the new conservatory Owen had mentioned, a glass structure attached to the east side of the house that caught the morning light. Mrs. Winters greeted them warmly, fussing over Josephine as though she were a long-lost relative rather than someone she'd met only briefly months before. "You're too thin," the housekeeper declared. "Teaching must not leave you time to eat properly." "Well, we'll remedy that today." After a hearty lunch, Owen suggested showing Josephine the recent improvements to the property. They walked together through the ranch yard, past the bunkhouse where the ranch hands lived, to the barn where Owen's prized horses were stabled. "This is Thunderbolt," Owen said, stopping before a stall housing a magnificent black stallion. "Best cutting horse in the territory, won the competition at the county fair last month." Josephine admired the powerful animal, who regarded her with intelligent eyes. "He's beautiful," she said sincerely. "And this," Owen continued, moving to the next stall, "is something of a surprise." Inside was a delicate Palomino mare with a flowing white mane and tail. The horse nickered softly and approached the stall door, nudging Josephine's hand. "She's lovely," Josephine breathed, stroking the mare's velvety nose. "Her name is Sunbeam," Owen said. "I bought her last month thinking she might be suitable for a lady rider." Josephine looked at him questioningly. "Mrs. Winters rides." Owen laughed softly. "Mrs. Winters hasn't been on a horse in 20 years and has no intention of starting now." He paused, then added more seriously, "I bought her for you, Josephine." "For me?" Josephine's hand stilled on the mare's nose. "But I know you can ride," Owen interrupted gently. "You mentioned growing up on a farm, and the way you handled the wagon tells me you're comfortable with horses. I thought perhaps, if you visited the ranch more frequently, you might enjoy having a mount of your own." The implication of his words hung in the air between them. Josephine's heart began to race. "Owen, are you suggesting? Let me show you one more thing before we discuss that," Owen said, taking her hand and leading her from the barn. They walked up a small hill behind the main house, where a stand of cottonwood trees provided shade. At the top, Owen stopped and turned to face Josephine, taking both her hands in his. "From here, you can see most of the ranch," he said, gesturing to the panoramic view below them. The main house with its new conservatory, the barn, the corrals, and beyond them, the vast expanse of rangeland stretching toward distant mountains. "Everything I've built over the past 8 years. It's magnificent," Josephine said sincerely. "You should be very proud." "I am," Owen agreed. "But lately, I've realized something important." He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "None of it means anything without someone to share it with." Josephine felt her breath catch as Owen released her hands only to drop to one knee before her. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box. "Josephine Vance, from the moment I found you beside that broken wagon, I knew my life had changed forever. These past months have only confirmed what my heart knew instantly, that you are the woman I want to spend my life with." He opened the box to reveal a beautiful gold ring set with a sapphire surrounded by tiny diamonds. "Will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Josephine's eyes as emotion overwhelmed her. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly. "Yes, Owen, I will marry you." Owen's face broke into a radiant smile as he rose to his feet. With slightly trembling hands, he removed the ring from its box and slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as though made for her. "It was my grandmother's," Owen explained softly. "My mother sent it from Boston when I wrote to tell her about you." "You wrote to your mother about me?" Josephine asked, touched by the gesture. "Of course," Owen replied simply. "I wanted her to know I'd found the woman I intend to spend my life with." He cupped her face gently in his hands, his eyes asking a silent question. When Josephine nodded almost imperceptibly, he lowered his lips to hers in their first kiss. It was tender and sweet, a promise of the life they would build together. When they returned to the house, Mrs. Winters took one look at them and burst into tears of joy. "Finally," she exclaimed, hugging them both. "I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the pantry to get you to declare yourselves." They stayed at the ranch for dinner. the atmosphere festive as Owen opened a bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. As the sun set, casting the desert in golden light, Josephine looked around the dining room, imagining future meals shared there, holidays celebrated, children growing up within these walls. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked softly, noticing her contemplative expression. "That I'm very happy," Josephine replied honestly, "and that I can't wait to begin our life together." They rode back to town under a canopy of stars, discussing wedding plans. Josephine had no family besides Aunt Margaret, and Owen's parents and sister were too far away to attend on short notice, so they agreed on a small ceremony in Goldfield's church in 3 weeks' time. "I don't need anything elaborate," Josephine assured him when he asked if she wanted to wait longer to plan a bigger wedding. "Just you and me and those closest to us." "That sounds perfect," Owen agreed, lifting her hand to kiss the ring that now adorned her finger. News of their engagement spread through Goldfield like wildfire. By Monday morning, every one of Josephine's students knew their teacher was to marry the owner of the Diamondback Ranch, and the classroom buzzed with excited whispers before she called them to order. The following weeks were a whirlwind of preparations. Aunt Margaret insisted on ordering fabric from San Francisco for a proper wedding gown, and the local seamstress worked day and night to complete it in time. Owen's sister, Catherine, sent a beautiful lace veil that had been in the O'Malley family for generations, along with her heartfelt congratulations and promises to visit in the spring. 3 days before the wedding, a telegram arrived from Boston announcing that Owen's parents had decided to make the journey after all. They would arrive the day before the ceremony, having traveled by train across the continent to witness their son's marriage. "Are you nervous about meeting them?" Josephine asked Owen that evening as they sat on Aunt Margaret's porch swing. "Not at all," Owen assured her. "They'll love you as I do. My mother's letters are already full of questions about you and plans to spoil any grandchildren we might give her." Josephine blushed at the mention of children, though the thought filled her with joy rather than embarrassment. She and Owen had spoken openly about their desire for a family, agreeing that they wanted several children to fill the big ranch house with laughter and life. The wedding day dawned clear and crisp, a perfect November morning with blue skies and just enough chill in the air to make the church comfortable despite the crowd that packed its pews. It seemed every resident of Goldfield had turned out for the occasion, along with ranch hands from the Diamondback and farmers from the surrounding area. Owen's parents, George and Eleanor O'Malley, had indeed arrived the previous day. They were elegant Bostonians who had clearly passed their good looks to their son, but any concerns Josephine had about their acceptance of her were quickly dispelled by Eleanor's warm embrace and George's hearty handshake. "Our son has written so much about you that I feel I know you already," Eleanor said, clasping Josephine's hands warmly. "And now that I've met you, I understand why he fell in love so quickly." As Josephine stood at the back of the church with Aunt Margaret, preparing to walk down the aisle, her heart was full to bursting with happiness. Her wedding gown was simple but beautiful, ivory satin with lace trim and tiny pearl buttons down the back. The O'Malley family veil was secured with orange blossoms, and she carried a bouquet of late-blooming desert flowers that Mrs. Winters had somehow coaxed from the conservatory. The church doors opened, and Josephine saw Owen waiting for her at the altar, tall and handsome in his black suit, his face alight with love as he watched her approach on Aunt Margaret's arm. The ceremony was brief but meaningful, with vows spoken clearly and rings exchanged with steady hands. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Owen's kiss was tender and reverent, a promise of the life they would build together. The reception was held at the Grand Hotel, where the dining room had been transformed with flowers and ribbons. There was food and dancing and speeches from well-wishers, but Josephine found her attention constantly drawn back to Owen, now her husband, who seemed unable to stop smiling. "Happy, Mrs. O'Malley?" he asked softly as they danced their first waltz as husband and wife. "Completely," Josephine replied, savoring the sound of her new name. "And you, Mr. O'Malley?" "More than I ever thought possible," Owen assured her, pulling her imperceptibly closer as they moved around the dance floor. They spent their wedding night at the Grand Hotel in the best suite, before departing the next morning for a 2-week honeymoon in San Francisco. Owen had arranged for a substitute teacher to cover Josephine's classes, insisting that they deserved time alone together before beginning their married life in earnest. San Francisco was everything Josephine had imagined, and more a vibrant city filled with culture, art, and excitement. They stayed at the Palace Hotel, dined in fine restaurants, attended the opera, and walked arm in arm through lush gardens that made Josephine gasp with delight after months in the desert landscape. They also spent time with Owen's sister Catherine and her husband William, who welcomed Josephine into the family with genuine warmth. Catherine, who shared her brother's dark hair and expressive eyes, became an instant friend, promising to visit the ranch in the spring and insisting that Josephine write to her regularly. "I've been praying for years that Owen would find someone worthy of him," Catherine confided during a moment alone with Josephine. "Now I can see why he fell in love with you so quickly. You're exactly what he needs: intelligent, strong, and kind. Not to mention someone who clearly loves him for himself, not his property or position." When their honeymoon came to an end, Josephine found herself surprisingly eager to return to Nevada. San Francisco had been wonderful, but the thought of beginning her life with Owen at the Diamondback Ranch filled her with anticipation. They arrived home on a clear December afternoon, the winter sun casting long shadows across the ranch yard. Mrs. Winters had prepared a special welcome dinner, and the house was decorated with evergreen boughs and red ribbons in honor of the approaching Christmas season. That evening, after the meal had been cleared and Mrs. Winters had retired to her quarters, Owen led Josephine through the house, pausing outside a closed door on the second floor. "I have something to show you," he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. "I worked on it before we left for our honeymoon, but wanted to wait until we returned to show you." He opened the door to reveal a beautiful study, with built-in bookshelves lining 2 walls, a large desk positioned near the window, and comfortable chairs arranged around a small fireplace. A writing desk stood in one corner, with fresh paper, pens, and ink arranged neatly upon it. "This is your space," Owen explained as Josephine walked into the room, running her fingers along the polished wood of the bookshelves. "For reading, writing, or whatever you wish. I know how important your books are to you." Josephine turned to her husband, deeply moved by his thoughtfulness. "Owen, it's perfect, thank you." "There's more," he said, opening another door that led to an adjoining room. This one was smaller but brightly painted, with a child-sized desk, shelves for books, and a chalkboard mounted on one wall. "I thought you might want to continue teaching, even if just our own children someday. Or perhaps tutor some of the ranch hands' children who live too far from town to attend school regularly." Tears filled Josephine's eyes at this further evidence of Owen's understanding and support. "You've thought of everything," she said softly. "I want you to be happy here," Owen replied simply. "The ranch is your home now, and I want it to reflect who you are, not just who I am." "I am happy," Josephine assured him, moving into his arms. happier than I ever imagined possible. That night, as they lay together in the master bedroom that was now theirs, Josephine reflected on the strange twist of fate that had brought them together, a broken wagon wheel on a dusty Nevada road. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his voice soft in the darkness. "That I'm grateful my wagon broke down that day," Josephine replied honestly. "It seemed like such a disaster at the time, but now I see it was the best thing that ever happened to me." Owen pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Remember what I said when I fixed it." "Consider it a wedding gift," Josephine laughed softly. "I thought you were mad saying such a thing to a woman you just met." "Not mad," Owen corrected, "just certain. From the moment I saw you standing beside that broken wagon, so determined despite your predicament, I knew you were someone special, someone I wanted in my life. And now you're stuck with me forever," Josephine teased. "Forever won't be nearly long enough," Owen replied, his voice solemn despite the smile she could hear in it. The winter months passed in a pleasant rhythm as Josephine adjusted to life as a rancher's wife. She continued teaching in Goldfield, riding Sunbeam to and from town when weather permitted, or traveling in the buggy with Owen when it didn't. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, reading aloud to each other from favorite books or discussing the day's events. Mrs. Winters proved an invaluable ally, teaching Josephine the intricacies of running such a large household and introducing her to the wives of neighboring ranchers, who soon became friends. Owen's foreman, a taciturn man named Frank Miller who had been with the ranch since its beginning, gradually warmed to her as well, especially after discovering her interest in a knowledge of animal husbandry from her years on her father's farm. Spring brought new life to the desert, with wildflowers carpeting the rangeland in explosions of color. It also brought news that filled the O'Malley household with joy. Josephine was expecting their first child, due in late October. Owen's reaction to the news was everything Josephine could have hoped for. His face lit with wonder as he placed a gentle hand on her still flat stomach, and tears gathered in his eyes. "A baby," he whispered, awe evident in his voice. "Our baby. Are you happy?" Josephine asked, though his expression left little doubt. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it," Owen replied, gathering her carefully into his arms. "I love you so much, Josephine O'Malley. You've made me the happiest man alive." As Josephine's pregnancy progressed through the summer months, the ranch prepared for the new arrival. Owen converted a room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, painting it himself and commissioning a local carpenter to build a cradle and other furniture. Mrs. Winters knitted blankets and tiny garments, while Aunt Margaret sent packages from Goldfield containing baby clothes she'd sewn. In August, Catherine arrived from San Francisco, determined to be present for the birth of her first niece or nephew. She brought trunks filled with gifts, including beautiful baby clothes, toys, and books. "William wanted to come too," she explained as she and Josephine sat in the shade of the porch, watching Owen and his ranch hands working with cattle in a distant corral. "But someone had to mind the business. He sends his love and promises to visit once the baby is born." "It means so much that you're here," Josephine said sincerely, resting a hand on her now prominent belly. "Especially with Owen's parents unable to make the journey again so soon." "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away," Catherine assured her, patting Josephine's hand affectionately. "Besides, I've been dying to see how my brother has adapted to married life. I must say he looks happier than I've ever seen him." "I hope so," Josephine replied softly. "He makes me very happy." Catherine's expression grew serious. "You know, when Owen left Boston all those years ago, our parents were devastated. They had such plans for him: Harvard, a position in the family business, marriage to the daughter of one of father's associates. His decision to come west and become a rancher seemed like madness to them. "He never told me that," Josephine said, surprised. "Owen doesn't like to dwell on difficult times," Catherine explained. "But it took years for our parents to accept his choice." They didn't even visit the ranch until it was already successful. She smiled warmly at Josephine. "But they approved of immediately. Mother wrote to me after the wedding that she finally understood why Owen had to forge his own path. He needed to find you." Josephine felt tears prick her eyes, touched by the sentiment. "Your family has been so welcoming to me. It means a great deal, especially since I have so little family of my own." "You have us now," Catherine assured her. "All of us. And soon you'll have this little one as well." She gestured to Josephine's rounded belly. The next generation of O'Malleys. October arrived with cooling temperatures and increasing anticipation. Dr. Peterson, Goldfield's physician, began making weekly visits to the ranch to check on Josephine's progress, pronouncing her healthy and the baby well-positioned. On October 15, 1877, after a labor that lasted through the night, Josephine gave birth to a son, Thomas Owen O'Malley, named for Josephine's father and his own. He was a sturdy baby with a shock of dark hair like Owen's and blue eyes that Dr. Peterson assured them might change, but which Josephine secretly hoped would remain the same clear blue as her own. Owen's reaction to his son was one of absolute wonder. He held the tiny bundle with careful hands, his expression a mixture of awe, pride, and overwhelming love. "Hello, Thomas," he whispered to the newborn. "I'm your father. Your mother and I have been waiting so long to meet you." Catherine, who had been present throughout the birth, offering support and encouragement to Josephine, wept openly at the sight of her brother with his son. "He's perfect," she declared, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "Absolutely perfect." The first months of Thomas's life brought new rhythms to the ranch. Nights were punctuated by feedings. Days revolved around the baby's schedule, and every milestone the first real smile, the first time he rolled over, the first laugh was celebrated as though it were a miraculous achievement. Owen proved to be a devoted father, happily taking his turn walking the floor with a fussy baby or changing diapers. He would often bring Thomas into his study while he worked on ranch accounts, the baby contentedly watching his father from a basket beside the desk. "You're spoiling him," Josephine observed one evening, finding Owen reading aloud from a book of poetry to their 3-month-old son. "Impossible," Owen replied with a grin. "Besides, it's never too early to develop an appreciation for Wordsworth." Spring brought Thomas's christening, with Owen's parents making the journey from Boston to attend. George and Eleanor O'Malley doted on their grandson, bringing him gifts and spending hours simply watching him sleep or play. "He has the O'Malley chin," George declared proudly. "And Eleanor's eyes, I think. The same shape, at least." "But Josephine's smile," Eleanor added, watching as the baby grinned toothlessly up at his grandmother. "He's going to break hearts someday, just like his father." Life settled into a pleasant routine as Thomas grew from infant to toddler. Josephine had given up her teaching position after his birth, but found fulfillment in tutoring several of the ranch hands' children 3 afternoons a week. Owen's business continued to prosper, with the Diamondback now recognized as one of the most successful ranches in the territory. When Thomas was 18 months old, Josephine discovered she was expecting their second child. The news was received with as much joy as the first time, with Owen once again overwhelmed with happiness and Thomas, though too young to understand fully, patting his mother's still flat stomach with gentle hands after Owen showed him where the baby was growing. "Baby," he said solemnly, one of the few words in his expanding vocabulary. That's right, sweetheart, Josephine confirmed. You're going to be a big brother. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall of 1879. By December, Josephine was in her final month, her movements slowed by her expanded belly. "You're sure you feel up to traveling to Goldfield for Christmas?" Owen asked as he watched her pack Thomas's little bag for the overnight stay at Aunt Margaret's house. "We could celebrate here this year." "I'm perfectly fine," Josephine assured him. "Besides, Aunt Margaret would be heartbroken if we didn't come. She's been planning this dinner for weeks." The journey to town was comfortable, with Owen insisting on extra blankets and frequent stops to ensure Josephine's comfort. Thomas, now a chattering 2-year-old with his father's dark curls and his mother's bright blue eyes, kept up a running commentary from his seat between them. "Horse, Papa, big horse," he exclaimed as they passed a team pulling a loaded wagon. "That's right, Thomas," Owen replied patiently. "Those are draft horses. They're very strong." Aunt Margaret welcomed them warmly, exclaiming over how much Thomas had grown since her last visit to the ranch and fussing over Josephine's condition. "You look ready to deliver any moment," she observed as she helped Josephine remove her coat. "Are you certain you should have made the journey?" "I'm not due for another 2 weeks," Josephine assured her. "Dr. Peterson said travel is perfectly safe at this stage." Christmas Eve dinner was a festive affair, with the table laden with roast goose, sweet potatoes, fresh bread, and all the traditional fixings. Thomas, excited by the special occasion, barely ate, his attention focused on the decorated tree in the corner and the packages beneath it. After dinner, as they sat in the parlor enjoying hot cider and Margaret's famous gingerbread cookies, Josephine felt the first twinge. She dismissed it as simple discomfort from overeating, but when a second, stronger pain followed 20 minutes later, she caught Owen's eye and nodded slightly toward the hallway. Once they were alone, she whispered, "I think the baby might be coming earlier than expected." Owen's eyes widened. "Are you sure? Should I fetch Dr. Peterson?" "Not yet," Josephine replied, rubbing her lower back. "The pains are still far apart, but perhaps we should make arrangements to stay longer than planned." By midnight, there was no doubt that labor had begun in earnest. Dr. Peterson was summoned. Aunt Margaret prepared the guest bedroom, and Owen paced nervously while Thomas slept peacefully, unaware of the drama unfolding. Unlike Thomas's birth, which had been long and arduous, this labor progressed rapidly. Just after 3 o'clock on Christmas morning, Josephine gave birth to a daughter, Elizabeth Margaret O'Malley, named for Owen's mother and Josephine's aunt. "A Christmas baby," Dr. Peterson remarked as he handed the swaddled infant to Owen. "That's considered good luck, you know." Owen gazed down at his daughter's tiny face, her eyes squinched shut, a dusting of copper hair visible beneath the blanket. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Perfect, just like her mother." When Thomas woke later that morning, excited about Christmas presents, he was introduced to his new sister. His reaction was a mixture of curiosity and confusion. "Baby?" he asked, pointing at the bundle in his mother's arms. "Yes, sweetheart," Josephine confirmed. "This is Elizabeth, your sister." "Can you say Elizabeth?" Thomas considered this, his little brow furrowed in concentration. "Lizzie," he finally declared, and the name stuck. They remained at Aunt Margaret's for a week, allowing Josephine time to recover before the journey back to the ranch. Mrs. Winters had prepared the nursery for the new arrival, setting up the cradle that had been Thomas's beside the new, larger crib he now occupied. Life with 2 young children was busy but joyful. Owen often joked that he ran a 1,000-acre cattle ranch with less effort than it took to manage their growing family. but his eyes shone with pride whenever he looked at his wife and children. As the years passed, the O'Malley family continued to flourish. Thomas grew into a sturdy boy with his father's love of the land and horses, while Elizabeth Lizzie to everyone, except her grandmother Eleanor, who insisted on her proper name, was a spirited girl with copper curls and a quick mind that delighted in books and learning. When Thomas was 6 and Lizzie 4, Josephine gave birth to their third child, a son they named James William, after Owen's father's middle name and Catherine's husband. Jimmy, as he was immediately called by his siblings, was a peaceful baby with solemn eyes that watched everything with apparent deep thought. "I think we have a philosopher on our hands," Owen remarked one evening, watching as Jimmy observed his own hand with intense concentration. "Or perhaps a scientist," Josephine suggested. "He seems to study everything so carefully." The Diamondback Ranch prospered along with the O'Malley family. Owen's innovative breeding programs and land management practices made it one of the most successful operations in Nevada. He was frequently consulted by other ranchers, and even by territorial officials on matters related to agriculture and water rights. Josephine found her own fulfillment not only in motherhood, but also in establishing a small school on the ranch property. What had begun as informal tutoring sessions for ranch hands' children grew into a proper classroom with a dozen students, ranging in age from 5 to 15. 3 days a week, children from neighboring ranches too distant from Goldfield for daily travel would arrive for lessons. Staying overnight in a dormitory Owen had built adjacent to the main house. "You've created something remarkable here," Owen observed one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, their children playing in the yard before bedtime. "These children would have had little or no education without your efforts." "We've created something remarkable together," Josephine corrected him, reaching for his hand. "None of this would exist without you, Owen." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Do you ever regret it, the broken wagon that stranded you here?" Josephine smiled, thinking of the journey that had brought them to this moment from a dusty road outside Goldfield to the life they'd built together over the past decade. 3 beautiful children, a thriving ranch, a community they'd helped to build. All because of a broken wheel and a cowboy with kind eyes who'd appeared when she needed him most. "Never," she replied honestly. "That broken wagon led me exactly where I was meant to be." Owen's eyes, still as warm and expressive as they'd been the day they met, crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "Consider it a wedding gift," he said softly, echoing the words he'd spoken all those years ago. Josephine leaned against his shoulder, watching as Thomas showed Lizzie and Jimmy how to catch fireflies in the gathering dusk. "The best gift I've ever received," she murmured. "A lifetime of happiness." "And many more years to come," Owen promised, drawing her close as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above their home. In the years that followed, the O'Malley family continued to grow and thrive. Thomas, following in his father's footsteps, developed a keen interest in ranching and business. By the time he was 16, Owen was including him in important decisions about the Diamondbacks' operations, grooming him to eventually take over the family enterprise. Lizzie's quick mind and love of learning made her a natural scholar. At 12, she was already reading at a level that impressed even the most educated visitors to the ranch. Her dream was to attend college in the East, perhaps even her grandmother's alma mater, Smith College in Massachusetts. Jimmy, true to his early contemplative nature, grew into a thoughtful boy with a talent for observation. He was most at home in the natural world, cataloging plants and animals, keeping detailed journals of his findings. Owen built him a small laboratory off the conservatory where he could conduct his experiments and preserve his specimens. When Josephine was 38, she surprised everyone, including herself, by announcing she was expecting their fourth child. Though the pregnancy was more difficult than her previous ones, owing to her age, the outcome was joyful. Robert Charles O'Malley, born on a snowy February day in 1889. "I thought we were finished with midnight feedings and diapers," Owen remarked with a chuckle as he held his newborn son for the first time. "Apparently, God had other plans," Josephine replied, watching her husband's face soften with love as he gazed at the baby. "Are you disappointed?" "How could I be?" Owen asked, genuinely surprised by the question. "Every child we've been blessed with has brought more joy than I could have imagined. This little one will be no different," and he was right. Robbie, as he was soon called, became the darling of the family. His older siblings doted on him, taking turns entertaining and caring for their baby brother. Even Thomas, now 17 and increasingly occupied with ranch responsibilities, would make time each day to spend with Robbie, reading to him or simply carrying him on walks around the property. As the 19th century drew to a close, the O'Malley family celebrated not only the approach of a new century, but also 25 years of marriage. Owen marked the occasion by presenting Josephine with a gift that brought tears to her eyes: a new conservatory, 3 times the size of the original, filled with exotic plants and featuring a small fountain at its center. "I remember you saying once that you'd always dreamed of having a conservatory," he explained as he led her, blindfolded, into the new structure. "I wanted to make that dream even bigger." Josephine stood speechless, taking in the riot of colors and scents, the delicate tracery of the glass ceiling, the comfortable chairs arranged to allow quiet contemplation of the beauty surrounding them. "Owen," she finally managed, her voice choked with emotion, "it's magnificent." "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Owen assured her, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "Your face tells me everything I need to know." That evening they hosted a celebration at the ranch, inviting neighbors, friends, and family to commemorate their silver anniversary. Aunt Margaret, now in her 70s but still spry, traveled from Goldfield for the occasion. Owen's parents, too elderly to make the journey from Boston, sent a beautiful silver tea service and a heartfelt letter expressing their love and congratulations. Catherine and William came from San Francisco with their 3 children, who were close in age to the O'Malley offspring and had formed strong bonds during annual visits. The house rang with laughter and conversation as the extended family reconnected. After dinner, Owen stood to make a toast, his silver-streaked hair and the lines around his eyes the only real signs of the passage of time. At 53, he was still strong and vigorous, his presence commanding attention as he raised his glass. "25 years ago," he began, his eyes finding Josephine across the crowded dining room, "a broken wagon wheel changed my life forever. I found a beautiful woman stranded on the road to Goldfield, and in helping her, I found my future." He paused, emotion momentarily overwhelming him. "Josephine, you have been my partner, my confidante, my dearest friend, and the mother of our children. Every day with you has been a blessing beyond anything I could have imagined that afternoon in the desert. Here's to 25 more years of happiness, if God is willing." Glasses were raised amid calls of "Hear, hear." And to Owen and Josephine. But Josephine hardly noticed, her attention focused solely on the man across the room whose love had shaped her life in ways she could never have predicted when her wagon wheel splintered on that dusty Nevada road. Later, when the guests had departed or retired to their rooms, Owen and Josephine stood on the porch of the home they had built together, his arm around her waist as they gazed up at the star-filled sky. "Happy anniversary, Mrs. O'Malley," Owen said softly, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Happy anniversary, Mr. O'Malley," Josephine replied, leaning into his embrace. "Thank you for fixing my wagon all those years ago." Owen's chuckle rumbled in his chest. "Best repair work I ever did, and I meant what I said at the time. It was indeed a wedding gift. The best one I ever gave, since it brought you to me." Josephine turned in his arms to face him, studying the beloved features that had become as familiar to her as her own reflection. Time had left its mark, silver threading through his dark hair, lines etched around his eyes and mouth, but the warmth in his gaze was unchanged from the day they met. "I love you, Owen O'Malley," she said simply. "More today than yesterday, but not as much as tomorrow." "And I love you, Josephine O'Malley," he replied, lowering his lips to hers in a kiss that held all the tenderness of their first embrace and the depth of feeling that only decades of shared life could create. Forever and always. As the 19th century gave way to the 20th, the O'Malley family continued to evolve. Thomas, now 24, took on increasing responsibility for the ranch, implementing new techniques and expanding their operations. In 1902, he married Sarah Jenkins, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and they built their own home on the northern edge of the property. Lizzie fulfilled her dream of attending college, graduating from Smith in 1901 with honors. She returned to Nevada, not to the ranch, but to Carson City, where she accepted a position teaching at the state's first women's college. Her progressive ideas and commitment to education made her a respected figure in the community. Jimmy, always the scientist of the family, earned a degree in botany from the University of California. His studies of desert plant life and their potential medicinal uses gained attention in scientific circles. Though he traveled extensively for his research, the Diamondback Ranch remained his home base, where he maintained extensive experimental gardens. Robbie, the youngest, grew into a cheerful young man with a talent for music. Owen had a piano shipped from San Francisco for his 10th birthday, and the house often rang with the sounds of Robbie's playing. By his teenage years, he was composing his own pieces, some of which were published by a music company in San Francisco. Through all the changes, Owen and Josephine remained the heart of the family, their partnership a model for their children of what marriage could be: a union of equals built on love, respect, and shared purpose. When Owen turned 70 in 1923, he officially retired, handing full management of the ranch to Thomas, though he remained involved in an advisory capacity. He and Josephine began to travel more, visiting Catherine in San Francisco, Lizzie in Carson City, and even making the journey to Boston to see Owen's family. "What shall we do next?" Owen asked one evening as they sat in their favorite spot on the porch, watching a spectacular sunset paint the desert sky in shades of gold and crimson. "We've seen the Pacific, the Atlantic, and most points in between. Where to now, Mrs. O'Malley?" Josephine considered the question, her hand finding his as it had countless times over their nearly 50 years together. "I think I'd like to stay right here for a while," she said finally. "Watch the seasons change on the land we love, spend time with our grandchildren, enjoy the peace we've earned." Owen's fingers tightened around hers. That sounds perfect, and it was. The following years brought a gentle rhythm to their lives. Mornings spent reading or gardening in Josephine's beloved conservatory. Afternoons often dedicated to their grandchildren, Thomas and Sarah's 3 boys, Lizzie's daughter and son, Jimmy's twins, and Robbie's little girl. Evenings on the porch, watching the sun set over the land that had been wild when Owen first claimed it, but was now a thriving, productive ranch that supported multiple families. In 1926, they celebrated their golden wedding anniversary with a grand party attended by family, friends, and what seemed like half the population of Nevada. 50 years of marriage, 4 children, 11 grandchildren, and a legacy that extended far beyond the boundaries of the Diamondback Ranch. During the celebration, Thomas proposed a toast to his parents. 50 years ago, a broken wagon wheel brought my mother to a dusty road outside Goldfield. My father, being the wise man he is, recognized a good thing when he saw it and fixed that wheel, but made sure to secure his future in the process. He raised his glass. To Owen and Josephine O'Malley, whose love story began with a broken wheel but has never once broken down in all the years since. Cheers erupted around the room, but Josephine had eyes only for Owen, whose gaze held hers across the crowded space. In that moment, she was transported back to their first meeting, the tall cowboy with kind eyes who had appeared when she needed him most, offering help with no expectation of payment. Later that night, as they prepared for bed in the same master bedroom they had shared for half a century, Owen took her hands in his. "I've been thinking about what Thomas said today," he began. "About our love story beginning with a broken wheel. It's true, but it's also not the whole truth." "What do you mean?" Josephine asked, curious. Owen's smile was tender as he tucked a strand of silver hair behind her ear. "Our story didn't begin with a broken wheel. It began the moment you were born, and I was born, and all the decisions and circumstances that eventually led us to that road outside Goldfield. The wheel breaking was just the universe's way of making sure we didn't miss each other." Tears welled in Josephine's eyes at the simple beauty of his perspective. "That's a lovely thought. And do you know what else?" Owen continued, his voice soft with emotion. "Our story doesn't end with us either. It continues in our children and their children and all the lives we've touched along the way. It's in the ranch, in the school you created, in the community we've helped to build." Josephine nodded, too moved to speak. Owen was right, as he so often was about the things that truly mattered. Their love had created ripples that extended far beyond themselves, touching lives they would never even know. "Consider it a wedding gift," Owen whispered, echoing once more the words he'd spoken on that fateful day when they'd first met. "The gift of a love that never ends." Josephine rose on tiptoe to press her lips to his, marveling at how, after 50 years, his kiss could still make her heart race. "The best gift I've ever received," she murmured against his mouth, "and one I'm grateful for every day." As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Josephine reflected on the long, winding road that had brought them to this moment. From a broken wagon wheel on a dusty Nevada road to a lifetime of love, family, and purpose. It hadn't always been easy. There had been hardships, disagreements, even tragedies along the way, but through it all, their love had endured, growing stronger with each passing year. "I love you, Owen O'Malley," she whispered into the darkness. His arm tightened around her waist. "And I love you, Josephine O'Malley. Yesterday, today, and always." In the gentle quiet of their bedroom, surrounded by the memories of a lifetime shared, they fell asleep just as they had for half a century together. Their hearts beating in time, their lives inextricably intertwined by a love that had begun with a broken wagon wheel and a cowboy's kindness, and had built a legacy that would endure for generations to come.